title for this morning is Beauty from Brokenness. And you'll have picked up it's quite a strange way to write. And Paul is talking about himself, but not saying me. He's talking about as though it's another person. And what's going on is this ongoing kind of tension with the super apostles, the false apostles, who would have gone around boasting about these amazing visions. Wow, I've had this amazing vision. Wow, I've had this great revelation. And they would be boasting about it. And Paul was actually saying, I could do that, I could play that game, but I'm not going to. Actually, I have had these real visions as well. But actually, rather than boasting about that, I am going to boast about my weaknesses. Many theories about what Paul's thorn was. I warm to the idea, if you look towards chapter 11, actually the other side of the page, around verses 13 and 14, when Paul is talking about the false apostles, and he's comparing them to Satan, who he says masquerades as an angel of the light. And then in today's reading we see that the thorn was a messenger from Satan. Well, the same Greek word, angelos, for angel and messenger. It's the same word. So that angel of the light, that messenger. So I think what Paul might be talking about is the pain caused by the super apostles, the false apostles, the accusers who are running him down and saying he wasn't real. I think that kind of opposition could very likely to have been the pain, but we don't know for sure. What we do know is that many, or not many of us, like pain. Do many of you like pain? Emotional pain? Physical pain? Well, there was a chap many years ago in the 5th century, Simon Stylites, who was a Christian. And he went to live on a pillar near Syria, this really tall pillar in the kind of desert land. And he was doing that, he thought, for the glory of God. Suffering on top of this pillar, getting his food taken up, his water taken up, in the sunshine, in the rain. And guess how long he was there for? 37 years. He thought, to the glory of God. There had been other Christians who were into flagellation or wearing kind of camel hair things and whipping themselves, thinking that they were putting to death the flesh for the glory of God. We're not into that in this church. We respect, actually, that's what they thought God wanted. I don't think God wants that, but they did at the time. Even in these days, some of you know this better than me, that in the Philippines, at Easter, a number of people will be crucified physically. And they believe that they are identifying with the passion, the suffering, the pain of Christ and doing it for the glory of God. Again, we would differ quite a lot on that. But not many of us, if any of us, welcome pain. I saw somebody wearing, actually I thought it was a really cool t-shirt. Probably means it's really naff if a dad thinks a t-shirt is cool. But I saw a really nicely designed t-shirt being worn by somebody in town yesterday. And it said something like, God reserves the toughest trials for the strongest soldiers. And I kind of get it. And I actually think, I wonder what that man is going through. But that is so different to my understanding of God. I do not believe, you might differ, I do not believe that God ever inflicts pain. I believe and understand these words that the thorn that Paul had was from Satan, not God. So how come we still have pain if God does not inflict it? I was thinking the other day that Kate and I, we have caused so much pain to our children. Kate and I have caused so much pain to our children. How have we done that? By having them. By bringing them into a world where there is pain, where there's brokenness. By having them, we have brought them into pain. And that's how I see it with God. That through him creating us, the beauty of creation, by him lovingly shaping us and moulding us, allowing us to be born into this life, because of the way the world is set up. We don't understand. Something to do with free will, perhaps. But God brings us into a world of pain. And that's my understanding of how God allows pain. That helps me understand God more clearly. With thorns, they're the kind of things we have no choice about. Some of the pain, you could say, we bring upon ourselves and it's a consequence. Change our behaviour and the thorn, the pain will go away. But with thorns, it's more of those things that we would never invite and often can't do much about. It might be loneliness, the pain of loneliness. It could be employment, marriage, money problems. It could be the challenges of ageing. It could be opposition from somebody in the way that perhaps Paul was being opposed. It could be illness, it could be physical illness, it could be mental illness. Some say Paul, and you can read it in some of his letters, was suffering from depression at times. Others say he probably had something to do with malaria or epilepsy. Again, we don't know. Some suggest it was a sexual addiction. I think it's good we don't know for sure, because then when we read the letter, we can all relate to it. We all know what this kind of thing is like. The focus this morning is going to be on this big question. Even if not from God, as I believe, if not from God, can God still work within our pains like this to bring something good out? A bit like the doodle. Can something good be brought out of a mess, and a painful mess at that? Can there really be beauty from brokenness? Again, the hint here for Paul, this humility that arose out of his suffering, as opposed to conceit and pride. Firstly, let's think about it being elusive beauty. It's not just a given. This kind of beauty, if it's there, can be very elusive. It needs our cooperation. If God is working in the midst of it, it needs our cooperation. It wasn't a given for Paul. At this thorn, humility. Long old process, we imagine, for Paul over many years. He says, I pleaded 3 times for it to be taken away. That's probably not literal. It just means I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. As you and I can relate to, yeah? I prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. And his humility came from humbling. Being humbled time and time and time again. What about you and me? What about us? With this kind of elusive beauty. It's often said, and I think it's a good phrase, it's probably overused, but with pain in our lives, we can either become better or bitter. We can either become better or bitter. There can either be this kind of beauty, or some of this beauty, or sometimes ugliness will arise. And I'm thinking of things like, if we have a pain and we try to anaesthetize the pain in an unhelpful way, it can sometimes make things look more ugly. If we use too much alcohol, if we use drugs, or a less obvious way, if we use food in a gluttonous way to numb our pain and to hide our pain, or retail therapy, if we end up spending just to cover up our pain. Not always helpful. Or business. Some people are workaholics because they're actually hiding from that pain, that thorn. Or busyness, the disease of the 21st century. And Christians often fall into that and give it the label, I'm doing the Lord's work. Well, actually the Lord does not want you to work to death and avoid that pain and stick in immaturity. It can be through denial. That never helps. Christians are very good often at using religion to deny reality. Of course, it's natural to pay or to pray for pain to go away. But it's not healthy to deny reality. And sometimes within churches, other Christians can collude with our unreality. And I'm thinking in terms of us having an unbalanced theology, the kind of thing the super apostles were going around saying. You don't need to suffer, you don't need to be ill. Look at Paul. He's not a real apostle because he's suffering. God will take it away. And that can be a lie. Because with the suffering, with a theology of healing, there has to be a theology of suffering as well. People, when they heard this, Paul saying, 3 times I prayed, they would have expected the obvious answer. And on the 3rd time, God took it away. But sadly, that's the way of the world's type of thinking. Sometimes God works in different ways. Sometimes it ends up with people losing faith. Well, God obviously is absent. Because they said my pain would be taken away and it hasn't been. So God obviously doesn't exist, or he's absent, or he doesn't care. Or they assume, and perhaps are sometimes told by other people, that the reason he hasn't is because you're bad. You're bad, that's why you've got your thorn. Sometimes it brings out a negativity in us. We become very negative. We become ugly because of the pain that we have. Or, and this is the exciting bit this morning, with God's help we can become more beautiful. And as I said earlier, Peter and I saw a glimpse of beauty in Ruth's pain this week. And actually the ways that she has coped with a lot of her physical and emotional losses. There's been so much beauty.